All right. Oh, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Is this ridiculous? So, we're in the middle of a series called "The Journey to the Cross." All right, and we're going to pick up in John 10. And if you haven't been with us for the entire trip, that's fine. You don't need to catch up really, but what we're seeing and what we have seen and will continue to see is Jesus beginning with a small group of followers moving towards Palm Sunday, right? I mean, there is a steady increase of popularity and discipleship among Jesus and his followers, and they're following. We're going to see it kind of culminate in a couple weeks. But what they want is they want Jesus to take his rightful place as king, all right? And so 2 weeks ago, we talked about the I am statements. We started looking at some of these I am statements. And remember, he said, I am the light of the world, right? He said, I am the light of the world. And it wasn't this just be good, do good, which we want to do that and we want to be a light. But when Jesus said, I am the light of the world, remember he said it was a hearkening back to Exodus, where he said he is the pillar of fire that the Israelites were following through the wilderness. And I love that song. Brennan was like, where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Because that's what the pillar was doing. It was when it would go, they would follow, and when it would stay, they would rest. And so that was kind of this. He says, I am the light of the world. And so the light of the world is that which we orient our lives around. And so from there, last week, you got, I think Pastor Robin's not here today. So she took the really good ones, all right? I wanted those ones, but she got those ones. And so remember, it was the story of the man born blind, right? Last week, and Jesus heals the man that's born blind. But the thing is, right, that no one has ever done that, right? Plenty of people had healed people that had become blind, but no one had been born blind, had been made whole before. And so remember, it's kind of that famous passage of, well, who is this man who healed you? Remember, he goes, well, I didn't see him because he's blind, right? And then he says, I don't know who he is, but I do know that I was blind and now I'm not. Right? And so it's just like, I don't understand. I mean, how many times you feel that way? Sometimes like, I don't really understand exactly who Jesus is, but I know that I'm a product of his grace and his power. And so I don't know. And so the guy goes, I don't really understand him or know him, but I know what he did for me, right? And so that's kind of where we pick up. And so in chapter 10, if you have your Bible, we're going to be in John 10, 1 Samuel 15 or 17, we'll get there. But if you want to get close, you'll be close. If you need a highlight, if you need to get close in your Bible before we get there. And then the 23rd Psalm and Jeremiah 23, all right? So if you want to get ahead of me and kind of mark those places so you can flip there when we get there, there you go. I've kind of given it to you. So, but the idea is this idea of the shepherd. Right, there's a lot of shepherd talk, and has anyone ever been a shepherd? Okay, okay. So we don't have a really good idea of what a shepherd is, right? Because for a lot of us, like those I can't think of what those like. I grew up in Sunday school class, right? And so I've colored many a shepherd, okay, in my life. And so, because that's a lot of what you do in Sunday school is color shepherds and angels. And so they're not what those images look like, right? Because we kind of imagine even the nativity scene, right? It's like the shepherd comes out and he's got his crook and he's really cute and he's got his hat on and the beard's kind of hanging crooked and like it's like, oh, they're so cute. And like shepherds aren't that cute, actually. If you actually ran into one, especially in ancient Israel, you actually might be a little afraid. And so if you want to get a good idea, so here's what we're going to do. Usually, I'll take the main passage, and then we'll read through that, and then we would kind of find places that it kind of connects in Scripture and how it connects to us. do it a little bit backwards today. We're going to focus on some shepherd passages and then connect them back with John 10. So we're actually spend more time in other shepherd passages, less time in John 10, but John 10 is, it really echoes so much of the Old Testament. So let's begin with David. David in 1 Samuel 17. See, it was 17. 1 Samuel 17, this is kind of the, you remember David and Goliath. We're kind of in the midst of David and Goliath in this passage. And what's going on is the Goliath had been just, what's the word I'm looking for? Taunting. Thank you. Who said that? Thank you. Taunting the Israelites just over and over for like weeks and weeks. He's just taunting them and taunting them and taunting them. And so David is kind of seeing this. He's kind of disgusted by it. And so he goes to Saul, and this is what he says. It says, David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." It's like he's been killing people younger than you since he was younger than you, right? He's like, this is what he does. You can't do this. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep." He's like, "I'm a shepherd. And when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God." And so a shepherd goes after lions, right? Like this means like he's not like the lion attacked and is in the midst of attacking, like carried it off, was on its good way, and David's like, "No, you're not getting away." Right, Dave? So why? It's like, why do you risk? Like, well, they're my father's sheep, right? He says, "I've been tending my father's sheep," and he's like, I will risk my life for the father's sheep. And so when you look at John chapter 10, then it kind of echoes that, right? In John 10:14, where Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, and just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and what? I laid down my life for the sheep." And so, right, so he's like David is this understanding of the shepherd is not this soft, mild position, right? It's a life-giving job. It's one that costs somebody and can cost you. And Jesus goes, "Yeah, David's a shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the perfect shepherd. I'm a better David. And I lay down my life for the sheep, for the father's sheep," right? And so there's that kind of idea of shepherd. And then what David does is in Psalms, right? He writes the 23rd Psalm, which is really a perfect description of what a shepherd is. And this passage is there might not be a passage for me personally that I have spent more time weeping over than this passage. It's a famous passage. But it's one that in my darkest times of life that I have just not even sought it out, but have found myself just in it, you know? And so it begins with, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." All right, and so I was really trying to like kind of walk through this passage, and I thought this is almost a title of the psalm, because the rest of it is kind of explaining what that shepherd, that the Lord as the shepherd looks like. All right, and so it's like, so what do you mean the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? Like, what is? Because that's the King James, right? That's kind of how a lot of us know it, right? But what do you mean I lack nothing? And it's like, well, I lack nothing because when I'm in need, the shepherd always provides, right? He says in verse 2, he says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. It's like he knows if I'm trusting my shepherd, right? If I'm trusting him. And here's a big difference between shepherding as we kind of imagine it, because a lot of we imagine herding, like with dogs, and we're like trying to keep them corralled. And it's like that's not necessarily how shepherding was happening back there. There was a lot of following, right? The shepherd, actually the sheep, you could get multiple shepherds together with multiple flocks, and they could actually all graze in the same area, and you wouldn't be able to tell what sheep is what sheep. But as soon as the shepherds would go in different directions, they would call them, and the sheep would hear and know their voice, and you could just watch the sheep begin to go back with their shepherd, right? So the sheep know the voice of their shepherd, right? And so it says, well, the shepherd knows what his sheep need, and so it says that he makes them lie down in green pastures. And I said, this is the part that sometimes you need to be made to lie down in a good place. And when I was, when my wife and I, when we were having some rough times, you got to go back to the February series to get the whole story. But so I'd got this long job, and I was looking to move out, and so I ended up with this job, right? That I still do now, but I ended up working 3,000 hours in that year, with about 500 driving hours, and it was a night shift is what I started on. So I was working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Well, you know who you can't talk to from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.? Like almost anybody, right? Right? Because like the majority of my work day, people were sleeping, right? And so there wasn't a lot of people in my life that I could talk to, and I was kind of forced to be alone with my thoughts, but also there was probably 100 or so other construction workers on this job at the same time. And so I couldn't talk to my friends, and I couldn't talk to my family, but what I did end up doing was spending a lot of time hearing stories from traveling construction workers from all over the country who had some of the worst stories you'd ever heard. And some of them doing great, and some of them still in the midst of it, right? And so it's green pasture was like, it's what you need for your sustenance. It's what you need to live. It's like you need a green pasture. And for me, sometimes I was forced, right? I was being made to lay down in this place where I could feed off of the lives of what other people were doing, learning from what people had done. And like those types of things. Like it's like, no, sit in this. You just have to stay here and just get healthy, get full. Right? It wasn't a lot of sermons. You know what I mean? It wasn't a lot. I mean, they were sermons for me, But sometimes we have to be forced to lie down, and that's what a good shepherd does, and that's what we have to do sometimes for the people that we're in charge of, our children or our family members. It's like, no, you gotta rest in this moment, and you just have to be here and be still. All right? So that's what a good shepherd does. And so he goes on. So it says the shepherd, so he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Right? And so this is the part that I think sometimes we'll stumble. It's like for his name's sake. And it's like, well, in John 10:10, right? This is the passage that I love. If you've been here 3 times, you probably heard me say it, right? That he has come that Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. And it's like, okay, so David's saying that it's about God, right? We do it for his name's sake, and then we're looking at Jesus, and he's going, well, I want you to have life, and I want you to have fulfillment in it, right? So which are those? And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? I think they can both be true, because my biggest desire in my life is that my kids would find joy and purpose and fulfillment, right? In whatever they do. I don't care who it's with, how it's done, where it's done. Like I, as a father, right, just want them to be fulfilled. Whatever that looks like for them, I want them to be in that joy. And so what happens then is that our children reflect onto the parents, right? And we know this because everyone's been in line at the grocery store and seen that kid just losing it, right? And we never think, if I was that kid, I would just divert my attention to something else. I would count backwards from 10, and I would tell my mother, you were correct. Right? We don't, like, that's not happening, right? What do? We go, if I were that kid's, right. So what does that mean? It means we think we could do it better, right? And so now that kid is reflecting on that parent. So it's what it is. It's just a reality. And so it doesn't matter where. And so my hope is that, right? So at the same time that they can have life, that life reflects onto me. And so so God, though, is the only one that is able or allowed to go, it's all about me. Because he's the only one worthy of that. And so, but he says it's all about me, and then he says, well, I want it to be about me by making your life full and making your life full of purpose, right? And so that's what the Good Shepherd does. And then he says this, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And so when life seems low, and when you're staring into the darkness, right? When you're staring into the abyss, David says, my shepherd fights off the lion and the bear, right? I fight off the lion and the bear for my sheep. And so my Father, it says in 1 John 4:4, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than he who is in the world, right? That's why I have comfort, right? Even in the darkest moments, in the darkest valleys, I know that the one in front of me, right, has the big stick, right? Essentially, right? He's the one leading me. I'm following him, right? And that's what the shepherd's like. I don't know what's back here. There might be a wolf over here, but I know and I trust. Listen, because that's all I can do is trust. If you're a sheep, you can't fight a wolf. You're screwed. Right? No, you have to have a shepherd. You have to have someone that has the rod and the staff, that they comfort you and they guide you. And that's what the shepherd does. And that reflects on God too. Like, because when people see you standing after you've been through the darkest valley, when they see you worshiping after they know what you've gone through and they know where you've been, they take note. People take note. And I know that because in the last month, I've had 3 different phone calls from 3 different couples, none of them from here. They go, we're struggling and we don't know how to make it. How did you do it? Right? It reflects on the Father. When we trust him and we walk with him, we're obedient to what he's doing, people take notice. And when they're going through it, when they've been through it, they go back through those notes and they go, oh yeah, I remember this person had that kid that was going through some things. I wonder if they'll sit down for coffee with me, right? Or this person just lost a parent, and I wonder if they'll just go have a meal with me, or like that's what the church is for, right? I mean, that's why we have each other. Like, we have a collective amount of stories that is incredible, from between both services. Like, what have we not seen if you really put us all together, right? So we have a collective story that we need to be able to tap into, but it reflects onto God. And so then the shepherd says, David says this about the shepherd. He says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And so he says, it's like in the presence of my inadequacies, in the presence of my depression, in the presence of my past failures, and in the presence of all those who would want me to fail, right? In the presence of my enemies, God still goes, I got good things for you. I got a table set for you, right? And if you just got to sit down. You just got to sit down and eat. The table's ready. I've got my staff. All your enemies can watch you eat. They can watch you be blessed. They can watch you be better and do better. In their presence, I'm going to feed you. There's another shepherd passage. And that, let me go back. So that the enemies, right? We have an enemy. And however you define what that enemy looks like, you know it exists, right? The John 10, other part of that passage is the thief, right? John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, right? And that thief, man, a lot of times it's me, right? It's like I want to steal from my future so that my present is enjoyable, maybe, right? It's a sacrifice of the future for the present. It's a lot of times what sin is. And those things want to devour us. If we continually live only in the moment, you won't have a future, right? You have to be looking into the next day and the next 10. We talked about 10 a few weeks ago. So the other passage on shepherd is it's in Jeremiah 23. And so Jeremiah is one of my favorite books. And so it kind of comes from that. Remember Jeremiah 29:11, super famous passage. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. I had it written on my wall since I was 13 years old, right? It was my go-to. And so this is kind of in the midst of that. So what God was saying was those Israelites had been put into captivity. And God was letting them know that, yeah, you're captive, but it's not going to stay that way. I have a plan. I have something going on. So it's in the midst of that that's happening. And so what Jeremiah's job as a prophet was to tell the people, hey, you're not living right, so life's not going to go right. Right? That's what the prophet does. You're not living right, so things aren't going to go right. And so what all these other leaders in the Israelite community, they would say, no, we're good. We got God on our side. We do whatever we want, right? That doesn't work. All right, and so they end up in captivity, and this is what God speaks over Jeremiah in Jeremiah 23. He says, woe to the shepherds who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture, declares the Lord. And so we have some bad shepherds in the mix. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago with the Pharisees, right? That the Pharisees were told, like, you're in charge. You're supposed to lead the people. And so we go all the way back to Jeremiah, and it's the same issue. It's like you're not leading the people well. So he says, therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to the shepherds who tend my people. Because you have scattered my flock and driven them away. Right? And they did that by ignoring Jeremiah. They're like, no, we're not going to listen to him. We're fine. We're going to keep living how we want to live. He says, you have caused them to scatter. Right? He puts the onus on them. Yes, they're scattered, but it's on the leadership. And so look at verse 3. He says, I myself, I love this. I myself will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them back to their pasture where they will be fruitful and increase in number. I will place shepherds over them who will tend them, and they will no longer be afraid or terrified, nor will any be missing, declares the Lord. Now watch this. Verse 5. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will live in safety. And this is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteous Savior. Verse 7, so then the days are coming, and this is huge, declares the Lord, when people, you got to imagine, I'll explain it. This is a wild thing to say. So it says, when people will no longer say, as surely as the Lord lives who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt. All right, so first off, this is the moment, right, that when they're looking for Jesus, when they ask Jesus in John 10:24, they says, the Jews who were there gather around him saying, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you're the Messiah, tell us plainly. They're like, hey, if you're the Jeremiah guy, like, if you're that one, if you're that shepherd that was supposed to be here, just tell us, maybe, right? Can we just know? Like, just let us know. But it's this moment that they're waiting for, that they've been waiting for I think it's 1,500 years, since Moses led them out of Egypt, right? And so and that's what I mean by when he says there's going to come a day. He's talking to the Jewish people, and he says there's going to become a day when around the Moses thing anymore. That's the whole religion is built on the Moses thing, right? If you've been here for a few weeks, we're constantly going back to Exodus, right? We're constantly going back to the wilderness and Egypt and coming out. It's where the Passover comes from. Like it's where everything kind of comes from. This Exodus thing. The whole religion is built on it. And Jeremiah goes, there's actually going to be a day when we're not going to really worry about all that, but there's something really big coming. Next time you get saved, it's going to be miraculous. It's going to be wild, and it's going to be all you can talk about. And in 2023, Jesus, this is 2,000 years after Jesus, right in 2023, 2,000 years after Jesus is raised from the dead, 3,500 years after Moses left Egypt, the most widely celebrated story is the cross of Jesus Christ. That's wild that Jeremiah said that, and now we're sitting in it. And I think it's Christianity, Islam, and then atheism, top three in that order, right? That's what we're living in. Right? That's what we're living in. And so let's go to John chapter 10, verse 14, and we'll kind of run through this. And I know I'm kind of going long here. He says, I am the good shepherd, right? And so it's an echo, right? That's an echo of the Jeremiah. So just as Jesus said, I'm the light, it was an echo of Exodus saying, I am that light. He's echoing, I'm the good shepherd. He says, I'm the Jeremiah shepherd. I am, when God said, I will do it myself, that's who I am. That's where I'm at. That's why I'm here. I'll do it myself. He said, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. And that's us, non-Jews, Gentiles, right? They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I laid down my life only to take it up again. He's talking about his resurrection. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. So you're not going to crucify me. I'm going to let you do it. I have authority to lay my life down. I have authority to raise it back up. This command I received from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? But look, verse 21. But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Right? We go back to that previous chapter. He goes, listen, and this is the reality of it all. That the Pharisees are continually banging their head against the wall because they want to rip Jesus apart. They want to tear him down. They want to say all these things about him. But every time they do, the followers go, I know you're saying this, but we saw this. Right? Like, you can say bad things, but all we see him do are good things. And it's like, as the church, whether it's in Lakewood or the United States, like, all we can do is be like Jesus. Like, there's going to be always going to be people that are going to say things, and they can make things up, or maybe it's their real experience, or maybe it's the way that or maybe the way they interpret an experience. Like, we don't know. And you can't do anything about it except love people and serve people. And that's what Jesus just kept doing. Just kept picking up his cross and everything that everyone had to say about him. He just kept picking it up and walking towards the cross. And so we as a church, like listen, it's great when we get together and we do things like the Habitat Restore, and we build houses, and like that's what we're going to do, and that's just what we're about. But I'm telling you, you will have a bigger impact if you're doing it as an individual. If it's not just something you do with your church, but it's just something that defines you. Because you're gonna impact your family way more effectively if you're leading them in loving the community, and you're leading them in loving their neighbor, rather than we're gonna go jump on what the church is doing. Look, we want to do it as a church, but we're gonna change the world if we're doing it as individuals. All right? And that's what we're called to. God bless you, church.
You need some water after that.